Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on a Friday night, which obviously shows you that, the state of my personal life in that I don't have much to do on a Friday night. And I should be out clubbing or, something, but here I am talking to you guys. So thank you for joining me. And I have a special guest. I have Thunderous One with me. Thunderous, welcome.
Hi everybody, and hi to you, Lloyd. And yeah, you're right. We should be out clubbing and pubbing and doing those things, but we're not. We're here discussing Islam again. So it's the second best thing.
That is true. So yeah, thank you to the audience. I see lots of guys. Zahar just joined us. Dardir Druha, welcome. We have Dragon, we have Casey, we've got New Zealand, we've got Rickenbacker von Braun. Lots of guys. So thank you. Today I'm going to be discussing with Thunderous. We're going to be talking about the Injil. Now, please understand. While these slides are, shall we say, technically ready, I really want to get your feedback. I want to do, in one sense, a dry run with this information. I've been very busy for months on a project I haven't really announced. I've been doing intense research, and I believe next year that I will be able to show convincing, compelling evidence that demonstrates the root source of Islam as well as the root sources of the Quran. Right. So I want to do work that is definitive in terms of the origin and the sources of all of the tales, the myths, the narratives within the Quran, as well as the, shall we say, the history of the creation of Islam, going back through time to the earliest sources that parallel things that we see in Islam today. So I think I can do that. I'm approaching it from a Gnostic, from what I would call a pseudo Jewish Christian perspective, as well as paganism. And then, of course, I'm also doing some work on the pre Islamic pagan era of Arabia, which is going to also add significant additional light on the development of Islam to actually give a coherent, logical, structured, historically based, and this is all historical work, historically based understanding of Islam, so we can see it as this hodgepodge, this concoction, this mixture of so many things that came before it. Right, so this is relevant to that, but we're going to discuss this. What is this Injil in the Quran? And why did Muhammad fail to preserve the Injil? They could have just put a copy aside under Muhammad's bed, just like they saved the Quran for 20 years, and Bob would have been our uncle. Don't you think, Thunderous?
Well, that's an argument I've used with Muslims since since I left Islam in the 80s as to why did Muhammad not keep a copy of the Bible? When you think about their allegation of corruption, their copy of Islam's copy of the Quran, the Bible, would have been a testimony that the Bible had been corrupted in some way or another. So the same applies to the Injil. Why do they not keep a copy? Absolutely.
Exactly. That would have solved a lot of problems. So now they make numerous assumptions, they make lots of assertions. However, they fail to provide any written evidence. So guys, let me dive into this, and we'll take this. So I'd like to get your feedback in the comments during the chat as well. So, and the same counts for the audience as well. It would be great to get your feedback. This is something that we need to unpack in more detail from a historical point of view. All right. So the original source, it's not the only source, but it is the framework that I used originally, is this paper, What is the Gospel Mentioned in the Quran, by Dr. Martin Whittingham. It's actually a very good paper. I don't agree with all the conclusions, and I believe I have more knowledge on some areas than he does. But he's the director at the Center for Muslim Christian Studies at Oxford, and he's got some good talks and he's put out some good papers. So that's the source that I'm utilizing now. So we're going to be asking lots of questions, hopefully changing the perspective, right? Bringing a new perspective on this. So is the Injil, we have to ask, is this Injil the four Christian Gospels as we know them? So the idea that the Injil refers to the Christian Gospels goes unquestioned. And I think we need to question this. And in light of the work that I'm doing now, I think this is a very important question. So let's ask a few questions to kick us off. Does the Injil refer to the Christian New Testament texts? In which language? Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek? This may well be relevant too. does this Injil refer only to the New Testament? And does it refer to the Gnostic or the heretical pseudo-gospels that were part and parcel of history then too in that region? So your thoughts, Thunderous?
First of all, my thought would be: does Islam has words in the Quran, but they don't know what the words mean? I think probably one of the popular ones is that you refer to Jesus as the Messiah, but if you challenge a Muslim as to what the word Messiah means, they won't be able to answer, or they refuse to answer because of the implications of what the Hebrew meaning of the word is and its implications. And I think the same thing goes with Injil. They likely don't know what it means. We, as those who follow the biblical narrative, and even those who don't follow the biblical narrative that study it, people like Bert Ehrman, would explain what the word gospel means. But Muslims don't. And I think the meaning of the word is kind of paramount as well, because of the implications as to what gospel means and what is the gospel.
Right. Agreed. Now, in terms of them rejecting certain ideas, this actually is a practice that goes back to the 8th and 9th and 10th centuries already. So this is something that is fairly common. I'm just going to keep... Okay, I'm going to leave us up on the top right here, but it might obscure certain of the... I realize I need to fix up my slides to work with the resized cameras that I've put up there. Okay. Now, we all know that Islam's final authority is the Sharia. Right? This is Islam's final authority. And now, my statement here is that academics misunderstand Islam. Now, we commonly state that Islam is 5%. Well, they say that there's no separation between church and state, or mosque and state in Islam. Islam is a complete political system. Islam is a complete legal system. So, let's separate them. Let's separate mosque and state and pretend there is no separation, and let us ignore the legal system, let us ignore the political system, let us ignore the military system of Islam, and let's pretend that it's only a religion which comprises much less than 5%, I would say, of the actual literature and the understanding of what Islam is, and we'll pretend the Quran is Islam. The Quran is just the Quran. It's not Islam. It's an entire civilization. It's written an entire series of law books. It has a legal system. We never look at the legal system. Well, I do. Islam's major authority is the ijma, right? The scholarly consensus. And the ijma, this consensus, created the Sharia and the fiqh, the application of the Islamic sacred law. And the ijma is, in practice, the most important of the sources of Islamic legal knowledge. Right, and this is the unanimous agreement of all of the Muslim scholars, right? So this, and it is also the unanimous doctrine and opinion of the recognized religious authorities. So we need to refer as well to the highest source within Islam and not just focus on the Quran itself. The Quran itself doesn't contain sufficient to fully describe Islam. A lot of it has been, the exegesis is in the Sharia. Just want to lay that groundwork before we go on. Any comment from you, Thunderous?
I wanted the first point there. Academics misunderstand Islam. Me personally, I would say that misunderstanding is quite deliberate because of the implications of understanding it and then releasing the information of what you understand public is basically a death sentence. So I think academics in some areas may possibly likely misunderstand Islam because they look at it not... How can I say? It depends on what academics, because if you're an academic that's got an evolutionary atheistic background, you're not going to look at it in a theocratic sense. So you're not going to see, if you like, the inconsistency of Islam in context of Judaism and Christianity.
True.
Okay,
Agreed.
so there's that. So like the people, the Bart Ehrmans of the world, though I think he's probably smarter than most academics. Then you've got the other misunderstandings, because the implication is if you say anything that exposes or challenges the narrative of Islam, you may as well write your will.
Agreed. And also I want to mention that from our perspective, we also see Islam and the Quran through a Western perspective. So we apply that lens and we don't always see it from their perspective, which is often very, very different from the way we see it. Remember, they're a deen. Islam doesn't call itself religion, it calls itself a deen. Religion is part of a deen, but it's about 14th in the list of priorities, right? So religion is one of the elements of a deen, but it's like 14th in that list. So first and foremost, it is a political system that is repressive, that is totalitarian, and we seem to forget that. Okay, now moving on. For perspective on this, I'm afraid I'm going to be moving us up and down like a yo-yo, which is going to be annoying for a bit, but this is the final perspective on Islam and other religions from Islamic law, right? Dini Islam, Erkan says, is surrender pact. Well, yeah, it is the subjugation and domination and humiliation of others under the power of Islam. This is how it is defined, how Deen is defined. So thank you for that. So now, final, Erkan says, as in unchangeable, indisputable. So understand, it says here, previous religions were valid in their own eras, but were abrogated by the message of Islam. There are erroneous theories advanced by some teachers and Quran translators affirming these religions' validity, but they deny or do not mention their abrogation. It is unbelief, kufr, to hold that the remnant cults now bearing the names of formerly valid religions, such as Christianity or Judaism, are acceptable to Allah after He sent the final messenger. So understand, it doesn't matter what the Quran says. What matters is what the scholars say the Quran says. I have a live connection?
I can hear you.
Oh gosh, stutters again.
Yeah, it's...
Okay, let me... Oh, this is great. YouTube is deciding to give us grief again. Okay, so anyway, now, while we may not understand their rationale and their logic, they state that the exegesis, the tafsir, explains the accord between the various Quranic verses and the Sunnah, even if they appear contradictory, and that Islam is the final religion that Allah will never lessen or abrogate. Of course, Allah has abrogated Islam, but, well, the Quran at least, not Islam. So, now, we also know that they have a very negative view, right, from within the Sharia of Christianity. For instance, it states here, it is unlawful to use, such as building a church. Now, when the proceeds are directed to, now Muslims cannot donate money to Christians for unlawful use, such as building a church, purchasing lamps for a church, or building walls around it. So this assists disobedience to Allah. The same is true of an endowment for printing the Torah or New Testament, which is invalid because the Jews and the Christians have altered the text and interpolated spurious material. Interpolated is effectively to edit and to add material for deceptive purposes. And doing so is to participate in their disobedience. So we are disobedient to Allah. So from the Sharia perspective, the final word, they have a very low opinion of the Torah, the Gospel, and Christianity. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Yeah, it's material that we've looked at before, but this here, what you're saying there, is a default that Islam has no choice but to make, considering the monumental differences between, say, the Torah and the Quran, the Zabur, which is allegedly Psalms and the Quran, and then the Gospel material. However you want to look at the word and what it means, its implications against the Quran.
Correct. Right. Now, Muslims are required, however, to believe in Allah's inspired books, given certain caveats. So, to believe in His inspired books, because they believe that the Torah is inspired, but not the Torah we have today, because that's the false Torah, means those which He revealed to His messengers, and believe, meaning to be convinced that they are the word of Allah, and all they contain is the truth. Yes, it says that. However, the obligation of belief applies to the original revelations, not the scriptures in the hands of non-Muslims, which are all textually corrupt in their present form. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, show me the corruption in the Bible. I was actually just going to my notes on my iPad where I wrote a brief, if you like, summary of
Sure.
arguments I have against the Islam and its claim of the corruption in the Bible. But that might be I'll bring out another time. But it's a default. Where else do they have to go? There's a certain irony with Islam as well, that it will claim corruption, bastardization, liquidation, interpolation. You know, all of these, the word salad that you expect from the Dawagandists, but then they rely on the Bible in its corrupt form in order to propagate the Quran.
I know, it's crazy how they rely on the Bible to prove the Quran.
Yeah.
Built for Speed says, how can they make such claims against the Torah and New Testament without having any primary sources to cross-reference from? That is true, but understand, to them, though, the Bible is not mutawatir, because they believe in oral transmission. Understand? They don't believe in written transmission because they don't have that, so they had to obviously undermine that and state that that is not a valid form of demonstrating authenticity.
Can I just add something on that?
Sure.
When you consider the argument of corruption of the Bible and corruption of the biblical text, you really have to ask the question, why would the Jews assist the Christians, or even why would the Christians seek the assistance of the Jews for the corruption, when you consider that the nation of Israel, to the greater majority, rejected Jesus as being the Messiah? So the understanding that the Christians have of Jesus being the Messiah is out of sync with what the Jews expected the Messiah to be and who he was to be.
Correct.
And when he was supposed to come along. So why would the Jews assist the Christians in the corruption of the Bible? And why would the Christians seek assistance from the Jews for the corruption of the Bible, particularly when you consider that the texts in the Hebrew scriptures all should point to Jesus as being
Right.
the chosen Messiah and such. So the argument doesn't make any sense that the Jews and the Christians will conspire and edit a new set of texts and distribute it to the whole known world. And there isn't a shred of evidence in history of this ever happening. And one has to bear in mind that, Allah sent 123,999 prophets before Muhammad. So this would not be the only book to be corrupted. There would have to be other examples of other holy books that have been corrupted.
Well, 123,999 books were corrupted, with the exception of the Quran. Right. Now, the Gospel equals the Injil equals the Evangel. So forgive me, I'm going to have to move my camera around a bit to not obscure things. That might be annoying, but I will redo this. I'll probably delete this afterwards. I said, think of this as a dry run. Now, the Gospel equals the Injil equals the Evangel. Right, also known as the Evangelion, the Euangelion. We'll discuss that now. The term Injil appears 12 times in the Quran, predominantly in verses ascribed to the Medinian period. Right, so not in the first initial Meccan period, and most occurring in surahs 3 and 5. Now, according to the Encyclopedia of Islam, I'm just going to move us back to the top. Injil, Greek, Gospel. In the Quran, Injil is used to refer to the revelation transmitted by Jesus, as well as the scripture possessed and read by the Christian contemporaries of Muhammad, i.e. the 4 Gospels, and in current usage extended to mean the whole of the New Testament. Right, now there are questions we can ask there. There are certain assumptions there that may be questionable. Now, is it a revelation transmitted by the Christian Jesus, is my question, or the Islamic Isa? Right, is this the actual gospel that we know today, or is this something different? Any comment before I move on? Because I don't want to dwell on it.
No, carry on.
Okay. Now, other words in the Quran. Now, so for instance, there are numerous words that are borrowed in the Quran. Now, Muslims like to claim that the Quran does not borrow words. However, it certainly does, and scholars, well-known Islamic scholars, certainly do make that claim. So, other words in the Quran. So, for instance, you have here kafir, as in kufar, kafiras. There are 491 occurrences. Believers, muminun. Okay, this I stole from Odom, just so by the way, and I might have added 1 or 2 things, but so muminun, amin there are 202 occurrences of the amana verb. Okay, SRK is in mushrikun, associated, 165 occurrences. The kitab, people of the book, there are 78 occurrences of people of the book. Submitters, muslimun, Eslemru, 39 occurrences. And then they speak of the Judeans, the Yahud, Hud, and the people of Hud. There are 9 occurrences of Yahud. And of this root, the Hud root, 13 occurrences to denote Jews, and 2 for the people of Hud, also Jews, sons of Israel, 11 occurrences. The Nazarenes, we don't know if those Nazarenes are actually Jews or if they are Gnostic Jews, let's call them Messianic Jews, but these Messianic Jews may not have necessarily been early Christians. They may have been Gnostic Jews, right, who've adopted, shall we say, certain pseudo-Christian beliefs. And there are certainly, in history, there are numerous of these groups, and this will be relevant in the future. There are 15 occurrences. They speak of the people of Pharaoh, 13 occurrences. Arabs occurs 10 times. People of the Gospel, there's only 1 occurrence in Quran 5:47. and that the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed therein. Any comment?
No, it's not an unknown thing that when Islam says that it's a pure language and there is nothing sort of like borrowed from or external sources, yeah, it's monumentally obvious that there are. So, no comment other
Right.
than that.
But it's interesting, if the Quran makes appeal to the gospel, if the Quran derives from the gospel, it only has one occurrence of people of the gospel. It's fascinating that there's only one reference to that. Right. Now, so interestingly, there is no mention of etymologically correct Arab Christians, which should be the Masihi. Right? The Quran mentions Romans, it mentions Sabaeans, who we apparently, by all accounts, as far as I can tell, are the Mandeans today. They still exist as a Gnostic sect, a sect of Baptists. They mention hypocrites. They mention those who became Judaized. They mention the people of Noah, the people of the Ad, the people of the Tammuz, the people of Abraham, the people of the Madian, the people of the overthrown cities, the people of the cave and of Arakim, the people of the ark, the people of Yatrib. Typo there, need to fix. The people of Uqud, the people of the elephant, the people of the book, the Al-Kitab. There are 32 occurrences of the Al-Kitab. There are 46 occurrences in which the word Kitab is used to define a community, a group of people according to the use of the Kitab. And there are 260 occurrences of the word Kitab. Not sure exactly why I left this in here, but as I said, I need to do a dry run just to get your guys' feedback. It may or may not be relevant. Any thought there before I go on?
Please go on. I'm fine.
Right. So what gospel exactly? So the Quran makes positive statements about the Injil. So while it does say positive things, we must ask, what text or content was being endorsed at that time? At the time that quote-unquote Mohammed spoke those words, what book was being endorsed? What teaching was being endorsed? Don't forget, just to step ahead, the full version of the Arabic gospel was only written, I think, in the 9th century, completed in Egypt, right? And interestingly, the Arab gospel contains the name Yeshua. It doesn't contain the word Isa, right? It doesn't contain the name Isa. And prior to that, the gospels were being transmitted orally, and there were only fragments of the Jewish gospels and even the Torah in existence in Arabia at the time. So did they actually have an actual book? Right.
When you ask the question, why would Quran makes positive statements about the Peruvian South? I think one has to bear in mind that Muhammad was on an appeal mission. So he would have to appeal to his audience. So by citing the Injil, whatever the context of the Injil is or the meaning of the word is, he was clearly trying to endorse himself to a Christian audience.
Right. Okay, now let's have a look. So what content was being endorsed? Okay, so let's look at Quran 9:111 as an example of a very serious dilemma. And I'll bring this up more than once, right? The question was, who are the people of the elephant? And I think this is a vague reference to to Hannibal, right? To Hannibal and the elephants. So, okay, now Quran 9:111 says, indeed, Allah has purchased. Remember this. Allah makes commercial transactions. You make a sale. You sell something to Allah. Typically, you would sell your soul. Yes, thank you for that. Very good. So yeah, you sell your soul. It is a commercial transaction. Allah buys something from you and He gives you stuff in return. For instance, we have the concept within Western culture that you sell your soul to Satan and Satan gives you treasures and pleasures, right? So unfortunately, Allah offers exactly the same deal, a contract. So they fight in the cause of Allah, so they kill and are killed. It is a true promise binding upon him in the Torah and the Gospel and the Quran. Now, Thunderous, pop quiz. Which verse in the New Testament contains the agreement where you sell your soul to Jesus and you promise to kill and to be killed for him, and you will get wealth and women in return?
None.
Doesn't exist, right?
No, doesn't exist. Not in the slightest. Not even the one that Muslims would like to use when it says, I've come to put not peace but a sword. You couldn't even twist that, though they like to twist. You couldn't even twist that to mean that.
Correct. I mean, they would like to twist a single verse and turn it into doctrine, but the fact is you can't find any such doctrine. You'd have to take one verse and stretch it out of all recognition, whereas we can go into Islam and we can find hundreds and hundreds of hadith, we can find dozens and dozens of verses, and we can find within the Sharia page after page after page of law, and we can go to the tafsir and go page after page of instructions to fight and kill. So this is clearly doctrine in Islam, but it's got no valid reference within even the Old Testament doctrine, and especially not in the New Testament.
And
Right.
can
Yeah.
I just add before I forget, because it's just come to my mind now while you were just speaking like that, when you look at what the word gospel means, and the message that it has, and the
Good news.
responsibility of the Christian, good news, but it's
Mm.
also good news about what? That's also an important context, which is under an obligation for a Christian to follow. And yet, you look how Islam twists it, and their message is totally opposite, in opposition 100% to what the message of the gospel is. And so there's an irony there that they're using a word that they don't understand, that they
Hmm.
don't know the meaning of, that we do. But whatever they think the word means, their message is 100% opposite to the narrative that we hold to. Theirs is warfare, where ours is peace and reconciliation.
Correct. Dragon says, I say, as J. Smith says, just compare the book and the man, and we have the perfect book and the perfect man for our Son of Man. By the way, just on that point, I have received an email from someone. His first name is Doctor. His last name is not Nike, and he's asked me to present a few things on his channel. Right. I believe he's not going to allow me to be on camera because he did say in the email, I have a face for radio. I agreed to that. I fully understand. But maybe next year will be rather interesting. I'll be doing some hint. It's a channel that presents historical issues about the origins of Islam. So I don't want to jinx it because, man, I've had interesting discussions with, let's just say, other apologists, and they failed to follow through. So, well, let's see. Okay, moving on. Now, I want to bring up this small discussion here. This is about a man called Saif Umar, a scholar, Islamic scholar called Saif Umar, and the deception of King Paul. You might know King Paul. You know him as the Saul of Tarsus. You know him as Saint Paul. But King Paul, okay? King Paul's deception. So, I want to bring this story up to show you how Muslims have twisted and written entire narratives to try to explain away this issue that the instructions on jihad do not exist in the gospel. After the ascension of Jesus, right, his followers numbered 700 families. Saint Paul, the king of the Jews, who was in this case either out of ignorance or out of deceit conflated with King Saul, because Paul's original name was Saul, whose kunya was Abu Shaul, and he urged that the Christians be killed, but they succeeded in escaping. So Paul was the king of the Jews. You might remember that King Saul, prior to David. So yeah, Paul warned the Jews that the followers of Jesus would gain their enemies' favor and then come back to wage battle against them. They accepted his suggestion of using a trick. So Paul was the king of the Jews, and he went to the rabbis and he said, you know what? I'm going to do a trick. I'm going to give up my position as king, and he's going to wear the Christians' clothes, whatever that means, and he's going to go to the Christians' army to deceive them. Now, tell me, how large was the Christian army in the 1st century? Thunderous?
There was no army in the 1st century of Christians.
They what? Are you saying these Islamic scholars were scholaring?
I'm afraid to say that they're being deceitful, dishonest, and waging a propaganda that has no basis at all.
Okay,
But
fine.
that's the only choice they have, because unless you're in agreement with the Bible, you can only ever lie against it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I see I need to fix the slide next time. So actually, let me do that right now. Oh my gosh, did I just... my bad. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to... I should have just left that alone, shouldn't I? Oh, bugger that. I'm just going to go on from where I was. So the Christians praised the Lord for the miracle of Paul's capture. Somehow, boom, bada bing, bada boom, they capture Paul. Life is good. At his request, they bring him to their chiefs. And Paul tells them he had met Jesus, who had taken his hearing, sight, and reason. And when Jesus returned these faculties, he promised to serve the cause of Jesus' followers and to teach them the Torah and its rules. So they believed him. The dumb Christians believe him, and on his orders they built a house for him where he devotes himself to religious life, and then he locks himself in. And then he tells the Christians he's had a vision. He was instructed that the correct direction for prayer was towards the east. They believe him, and they left their Qibla. I will tell you that in the 2nd century there are two, but there's certainly I have found the original root source for this, where there was a group of, shall we say, heretics where this is directly taken from, and Islam is quoting this directly from two heretical sources that I found. So then he convinced them that all food was permissible. And then Paul has a third vision. He convinces the Christians it is their duty to abolish jihad. It is their duty to abolish all warfare. So Paul tells the Christians, and this is the story that Muslim propagandists thought up from as early as the 9th century, 8th century, to explain away the absence of the instructions for jihad in the New Testament. So, on the prohibition of jihad, Paul says, I think that no one ought to be harmed, and no one recompensed. So whoever does evil to you, do not give him what he deserves. Oh, so he deserves it. If one slaps his cheek, let him turn to him the other, and if he takes some of his clothing, let him give the rest of it. And the Christians accepted this, and they abandoned jihad. Your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I was thinking of is after the release of captivity from Babylon, was it 537 BCE? The nation of Israel, or those that wanted to, went back to Jerusalem, rebuilt the walls and rebuilt the temple. I don't recall any warfare from that period of time up until the 1st century. So what jihad were the nation of Israel involved in from the release of captivity from Babylon up until the arrival of Jesus? So why would there be a need for an army or a jihad then?
Exactly. This is a reference to Quran 9:11, which claims there was jihad, so they're claiming that Paul edited the Bible.
But you have to have an enemy.
I know. And the Christians had no army. There was no standing army. They were not warlike. So
yeah, so the only natural enemy is it was, and they weren't an enemy. They were just all like in subjugation, and that would have been the Romans.
Yeah, and the Romans were the big bully in the room, right?
Yeah.
Right, so Christianity never had an army. There's no Christian army, exactly. I mean, unless you want to talk about the Crusades, but that's a whole different thing for a whole different... Paul was a time traveler, Veronica. If you look at my polemics series, you will notice that, yes, Paul was. This is my polemics series, okay? Islam versus St. Paul. It's... Seriously, when you go through the actual root sources of the arguments against St. Paul that the Islamic scholars make and that the Dawah Gandists make today, you'll notice that their top scholars are clowns. And that's being polite. These people are clowns. Because they will say, Paul corrupted the Bible. Great. When you go back to the root source, the actual historical documents that these arguments derive from the very earliest Islamic scholars, and you go across all the scholars, you realize, for instance, one of the arguments that they make is that the Torah was corrupted 500 years after Moses died. Now, Moses died roughly 1900 years. Moses died 2400 BC, if I remember correctly. So Moses dies approximately 2400 BC. So 500 years after Moses is 1900 BC, 1900 before the birth of Christ. Fantastic. So they claim that a certain rabbi, Ibrahim ben Ezra, they claim that this rabbi rewrote the Torah because the Torah was lost. Jews escaped Jerusalem and they took the Torah with them and it was lost, and this rabbi rewrote the Torah. Rabbi Ibrahim ben Ezra, if I recall the name, he lived in the 11th century. So he lived 900 years after Moses died. So he lived 3,500 years after Moses died. My bad. So how did a guy in the year 1900 BC rewrite the Torah when he lived 3,000 years later? Understand, that makes no sense. These people are complete clowns, as I said. Ibn Ezra, yes, Nathaniel.
The other thing is as well is that it shows a remarkable ignorance that Islam has on the nation of Israel from the time of Moses to the 1st century. They were voracious readers and writers.
Yeah.
In fact, when you go through the Hebrew scriptures, How many times does the God of the Bible say you must read this law in an undertone? Read it when you're laying down, when you wake up, as when you're walking on the road to your children. You must inculcate this. So this would show that the nation of Israel, as a people, were an educated people. They could read or write. There wasn't one copy, as it were. Many people would have had their own copies of the law. I think it was the Masoretes that were the copyists of the law as well. So to suggest that there was only one book shows a remarkable ignorance. And the fact that we've got so many parchments, fragments, and scrolls that are in existence today as evidences is yet again a remarkable ignorance on the part of Islam.
Yeah, no, these anachronisms. I mean, for instance, they speak about certain Christian sects which were from the 6th and 7th century, and they redact them into the 1st century, and they say that Paul started this sect in the 1st century. Like that's not possible. There was no communication across time at that time, right? So yeah, there's just one after the other. It's just crazy. Okay, now Muslim Arabs recognized in the Old Testament cultural material that fits the Middle Eastern culture. I mean, this is true, right? However, Muslims believe, and they assert, that the Injil must have commanded that these Middle Eastern cultural themes, such as circumcision, dietary laws like prohibition of pork, and so forth. So they claim that because this is Middle Eastern, it must have been on that theme, right? And oddly enough, circumcision and the dietary laws like the prohibition of pork, these are actually the very same things that Muslims and nowadays accuse Paul of altering or corrupting. These are the very same things. And Muslims also fail to realize that God does not command these Arab cultural themes upon all of humanity in his covenants. Circumcision was given only to the house of Abraham, and the dietary laws were given to Israel alone. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
These are religious things, not relationship things. The nation of Israel were in a covenant to have a relationship with their God. If you look at, say, something like Proverbs chapter 2, verses 1 to 5, it's talking to the individual as to dig for it as for hidden treasure, to find the understanding of who God is. It wasn't some kind of religion followed by rote. So when you're looking at circumcision and the prohibition of eating pork, which is their favorite go-to, it's all visual things. It's full of religiosity and superstition and such. It's not about having a relationship with God, which is what the nation of Israel were encouraged to do. And you can see that through the book of Proverbs, for instance. How many times does Yahweh or Jehovah turn around and say, my son, my son, my son? He wants a relationship with his children. It's not about a book of do's and don'ts.
That is very interesting. That is true in Islam and the Sharia. These are just regulations, rules. Follow this, do this, and you're all good. Also, by the way, I want to make note again in the series that I'm discussing, which I will do next year. It's very detailed, but I genuinely believe that I can, with some level of confidence, state that I have found the root source of Islam and the root sources of the Quran. I will be able to demonstrate very clear connections to a sect that begins in the early 2nd century. Right, and then traces its way through history, influences other sects, but there's a clear line between them. And circumcision, dietary laws, these things are things that they push, and in fact, these groups accuse Paul of corruption of the law, and Islam just inherited that. Yes?
Just yet again, if you was to ask people, for instance, particular Muslims, right, just on those 2 points, say why is pork not allowed, and they'll just say it's a dirty creature. That's the only argument they'll ever have. But then you'll ask, well, who created the animal? The animal must have come from somewhere. If it's so bad, then why did your Allah create it? And so the other point with circumcision, you see, we know why circumcision was given as a prescription to Abraham. Okay, it was as a sign as to who God's covenant people were. Yet when you look at say Islam, you ask the question, why is circumcision given? Why was that commanded? After all, Allah designed the foreskin on the tip of the penis. So why is he asking you to remove it? What is the point there? And yet it's another example of Islam where when you challenge them on certain things, because it's religion and not a relationship, they don't get it. And these are 2 examples of where commands are given, but they don't know how to respond.
Those are very fair points. Aquarian Riddle says the Quran is full of Aramaic words whose meaning was lost in translation. And what is very interesting, there's an original, as I just mentioned, I have an early 2nd century source that I will be showing direct parallels with Islam, which is a direct historical, these ideas transferred themselves with traceable links through history to Islam, and the original sources that Islam has taken these ideas from were in Aramaic. So, right, now, so Paul, acting in accordance with the covenant of Noah, right? This is the covenant of Noah, where people lose their minds and say the covenant of Noah is where the Jews are going to take over the world, eat your babies, and drink their blood. Commanded Christians to keep the covenant of Noah. Now, understand there were many, many major covenants, minor covenants, lesser covenants throughout the Bible. The covenant of Noah contains 5, you could argue 6 of the 10 commandments are within the covenant of Noah. Those are 7 commandments. They're a precursor to the 10 commandments. And what is interesting is that when I ask people who tell me that that the covenant of Noah is the way that the Jews are going to take over the world and eat everybody's, eat everybody's kids, you say, fine, so 5 or 6 of the 10 commandments are literally word for word in the covenant of Noah. Does that make the 10 commandments like 60% evil? And I never get a good answer, and they say, well, it's about governments. Well, then we need to look at Romans. But so anyway, moving on from that, that's not relevant to today. So looking at the covenant of Noah, he commanded Christians to keep the covenant of Noah in the manner that the Council of Jerusalem in the book of Acts came to understand it, right? Plus the belief in Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Is it relevant for me to just briefly show the covenant of Noah, do you think, Thunderous?
I will go along with it because it'd be interesting to me.
Okay, yeah, so let me just do this right now. I'm just bringing up my notes. Give me 1 second, guys, because, yeah. Covenant of Noah.
While you're looking, can I just ask people in the audience if they can hear any echo on my side? I do believe it was taking place earlier on. If they can just give some kind of thumbs up, everything is fine, because I think I might have solved what the issue was.
Yeah, no, true. So, guys, the covenant of Noah, I have a talk on this. It's quite detailed, and like most of my stuff, it's incredibly detailed. But let me just go to this. Okay, this is the basic overview of the 7 laws of Noah. Okay, the Noahide laws that anti-Jewish people lose their minds over this. Let me see. The 7 laws of Noah are biblical prohibitions from God against thou shalt not deny or curse God. You shall not worship idols. You shall not murder. You shall not practice adultery and sexual immorality. You shall not commit theft. You will not eat the flesh torn from a living animal, nor drink its blood. Right? And there is the obligation to establish courts of justice and also, by implication, just governments. Okay? So understand, so this is where Paul, if you read Romans, this 7th law would come from that. So I can go into that another time, but within Romans, Paul actually does additional exegesis on the 7th point. And so once I've destroyed these 6 points, where people say, okay, well, the laws of Noah seem, that's all holy because, it's just like the 10 commandments. They'll say, yeah, but it's here where they're going to establish courts of justice to steal all your stuffs. And then we can go to Romans and see if, then again, right. So 6 of the laws are derived from Genesis. The 7th is the establishment of courts of justice. 5 of these laws are repeated in the 10 commandments, directly, verbatim, right? 9 of the 10 commandments are repeated and renewed in the New Testament, right? And the covenant of Noah from Genesis 9, 8 to 17 applies to all of humanity and to all other living creatures. So in this covenant, God promises never again to destroy all life on earth by flood. Now remember, Noah was a righteous man. So what was it that made him righteous? This is prior to the establishment of the 10 commandments. Right. Okay, is that sufficient?
Okay.
Hopefully that clarified. Now, Muslims, in their arrogance, assert and believe that circumcision, dietary laws, and the Arab way of life must be universal. Now, what is interesting is that you go back to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th century sects, they made the very same claims against Christianity. And in fact, they made the very same claims against St. Paul. Okay? And of course, universal laws in Islam is known as the Fard al-Ain. Now, today, Muslims dogmatically refuse to see that the Old Testament and the New Testament, in accordance with it, do not agree with them. Right. Your thoughts?
No, I'm going to comment on that.
Veronica, this Noahide thing, in my point of view, is an invention of Chabad and other conservative rabbinical groups who try to come up with a salvation message for the whole world. That would be false. Sadly, that would be very, very false. And we all have an opinion. I think that pineapples are an enemy fruit, for instance. I think pineapples need to be exiled, preferably into volcanoes, because, I mean, seriously, it's like, have you ever tried, imagine trying to eat a pineapple, that could be very harmful, especially like with those nasty serrated edges, leaves and things like that. The only way to approach a pineapple is with a knife. Pineapples are dangerous. Okay? I mean, why did God choose a dove as the symbol of peace? Doves have claws and vicious beaks, and they poop all over everything. So I think the dove was the wrong. You know what would be a nice symbol of peace is a pillow. Pillows are gentle. Pillows are soft. Pillows are warm and comfortable, and you can snuggle with them. So yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think. We all have opinions. Some of them are less informed than other opinions. Moving on. Right, Muslims should be aware that Paul stays true to the covenant of Noah, but this forces them to argue the preservation of biblical scripture, which is a weak argument at best. So they cannot prove that the biblical scripture is corrupted. Any thoughts on that? Shall I move on?
Well, I was just looking at that and just thinking that the fact that Islam is, as I was speaking to somebody funny enough earlier on today about Islam and cigarette smoking. I was actually talking to a Muslim, and I was saying that the reason why you people can't understand whether it's right or wrong is because you've got nothing in scripture to tell you it's right or wrong. This is why you carry on smoking, because
Right.
even though you know it's suicide in slow motion, and you know that even it's suicide for somebody else, or it's dangerous for somebody else if you're smoking, because they can passively get injured by your exhaling of the smoke or the wafting of your cigarette. But that's where it's different, say, to the Judeo-Christian book, because you see,
Right.
sometimes God does not answer a question with a right and a wrong, good or a bad. He gives you enough information in there because he knows how the human brain works. A spiritual person will look at the scriptures if they're in a situation and then formulate a response based on principles that they can discern and glean from scripture. The Bible can't answer every situation or every question for any situation you might find yourself in, but a spiritual person will be able to look at the scriptures and then come to a satisfactory conclusion that's going to be in line with God's will. Islam can't do that. This is why we have the situation with what you're putting in that text there now.
Right. Built to Speed says that cauliflower is my sworn enemy. Look, I think Brussels sprouts are small, dangerous, and very slippery, and you need to keep your eye on those things. But like I said, pineapples are an enemy fruit. The only way to approach a pineapple is with a knife. You cannot trust a fruit that you have to approach with a knife, a fairly sharp knife, if you want to make it safe. Right? And then, of course, Terminator Extraordinaire says, Mark 7:19. For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. And yes, that is correct. XYZ says, as Veronica mentioned earlier, Muslims have no reference of the Gospels. Yep. BMW says people laughed and mocked Noah for building the ark, but through his obedience and faith in God, he was the first person in the Bible to be called righteous. Now, here's the question then. So we have to ask. Now, exegesis, as righteous, Thunderous mentioned, I was about to call you righteous one. Sorry. As Thunderous mentioned, there needs to be an exegesis. You have to take the principle and try to apply it to situations which are not directly and explicitly referenced within the text. So Noah is called righteous. So what did he do that was righteous? Right? What set him apart? What were the acts that he did that made him different from the people around him? Right? So you have to then ask yourself, so what are the things that he did? What set him apart? What specifics? You know? You can't be vague, you need to be precise. And these are the things that determined how he was different, and that's the model that is used for the 7 laws of Noah. But that's a very lengthy discussion. Yes?
I was just going to say, somebody said that Noah was declared righteous, and I think Abel was declared as righteous, not maybe using those words, but it's kind of clear he had God's favor, as did Enoch. But the thing was with Noah set, I think, a quote was got it fulfilled prophecy, which is something that Abel and Enoch did not do, and set out acting in faith when the God of the Bible, Jehovah Yahweh, said that he was going to bring about a global deluge. And he used Noah's example to set a pattern. And we know it's a pattern because Jesus mentions that at Matthew 24:36, as does Peter.
Right. Colossians tells us that if you put cheese on cauliflower, it neutralizes the cauliflower and makes it safe. I think that's a fair statement. So yeah, Colossians, thank you for that. So guys, you're not only going to get sort of this kind of academic material, but also very valuable information on how to pacify dangerous foods. Thank you very much for that, guys. Keep the contributions coming. Right. So, right, early Arab authorities attempt to find an Arabic origin in the root NJL. Okay, so they attempt to find an Arabic root in this Injil. Al-Qurtubi, who died in 1273, well 672 according to our calendar, suggests that Najil means root, water, or breadth. Hence, the Injil is a broad source of light and guidance. I don't know how the guy gets a broad source of light and guidance from root and water. That doesn't follow. That's a non sequitur. And other possibilities. Of course, he doesn't shut the door because he knows that makes no sense. Your thoughts there?
I think that this is a typical example of where learned people that came along later on in Islam and tried to clean the mess that was left behind. This is all. This is just a demonstration of spin.
Yeah, and other possibilities, exactly. So that's Qurtubi, fantastic, great, amazing skill as an academic, that guy. Others reject the Arabic origin of the term, including a man called Al-Zamakhshari, and he's from, he died in 1143, 538, I think this is in their calendar, in 1143 now, and Al-Bidawi, 1260, right, so these are late authors. The most likely origin for NJL, this Arabic root of the Injil, is the Greek Evangelion, the good news, entering the Arabic via an Ethiopian word called the Wangel. Right?
It's just interesting. Can I just add on there? The Ethiopian. It's interesting that it comes from Ethiopia because in the book of Acts, I think it's chapter 18, somewhere around there, it talks about the Ethiopian eunuch. So there's a history of the message of the Bible from, was it Philip, that ran alongside the Ethiopian eunuch, and he was reading aloud the book of Isaiah.
I think you may be right. Asking questions. Yes.
So there is, if you like, a history or strong history of a good, sincere, certainly peoples from Ethiopia going to Jerusalem to worship and then going back. And there's an example of somebody going back with the message of the Bible as it was from directly one of the apostles.
All right. Okay. No, that's fun. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's actually something worth noting and looking up. Right. So now, looking further at the etymology of the word Injil, slide number 3 on this one. We're just covering the number 3. So according to Arthur Jeffery, right, the long vowel ending in Wangel, like the long second syllable of Injil, is a closer resemblance than another proposed root for the Greek Evangelion into Arabic, which is the Syriac Evangelion. So most people believe that the Syriac Evangelion was translated into the Arabic from, so Evangelion seems apparently more accurate than Evangelion, because you will see the word Evangel as well. Anyway, so look, this is an academic discussion beyond me. I thought I would add it in here for interest. But this just talks about the historical root for which word came in, the Greek word, the Syriac word, the Ethiopian word. Well, it looks like it's the Ethiopian one wins this fight. Okay? Now, the assumption that some Quranic terms were originally non-Arabic words has been seen as controversial. Okay? But, obviously, this is not the case when these words are proper nouns, i.e. names, because a name is a name, right? Let's see, BMW says, Euangelion, the good news of the coming of the Messiah, the gospel, the generation after it expresses sometimes the giver, sometimes the subject, the Messiah. Yeah. Right. Now, Al-Suyuti in the Itqan devotes a chapter to this topic, but makes no mention of the term Injil. So, Al-Suyuti actually speaks of foreign words that get included in the Quran. Right. So, early Islamic scholars do talk about it. Muslims deny it today because they want to claim it's completely clean of any earlier historic sources. I wonder why they would say that. Thunderous, your thoughts?
Well, I'm just thinking to myself, this is where it becomes what the Apostle Paul, not in this conversation that we're having this evening, but certainly with Muslims, about an argument of words and what words mean, and getting lost in that. I think deliberately with Muslims, this has to be the case, because I think when you start looking at Qurtubi and people that came centuries later that were more academic and literate, they could probably go to something like the gospel as it was then and realize we've got a problem here because what we thought was the gospel totally contradicts from Matthew,
Hmm.
Mark, Luke, and John, everything that's in the Quran and what we thought. So then it had to become some kind of narrative had to be set up as to what words mean so as to give wiggle room, so
Mm.
to speak, as to what the gospel really is in
Right.
their parlance.
Yeah. Sister of Aaron, daughter of Imran, actually just brought up something very relevant. We know, for instance, that words were taken from modern English into the Quran. For instance, if you take the term take beer, this is a very common, very popular term within Islam, take beer. Right? So obviously they've not only stolen ancient Greek words, they've actually stolen modern terms. So look, I mean, they're very sharp, very good catch. I like that. She caught this, well done. So yeah, they need to start explaining why they claim that people should take beer. This also goes against the Quran. I'll leave it at that, you guys. But good catch there. Thank you for that. Right, moving on. I hope you guys aren't taking everything I say seriously, right? Because oh, anyway, moving on. Um, right now, so Sleepyhead Luke says, thanks for this. Been diving deep into Islam last few weeks and in need for help. So, yeah, this is going to get deeper and, yeah. So, Jesus never used the word evangelion or the word Injil, right? Interestingly, and thanks to one of the guys in the that actually made the comments. So I pick up things from you guys as well because I don't know everything. I learn a lot from you guys as well. So Jesus used the word bashar for good news from Isaiah 61:1, which is, and this is the Hebrew phrase here, the Hebrew word here, bashar. Okay, bashar, Arabic term for humanity. Thank you for that, Erkan. Okay. Okay, yeah, so now Strong's H1319 tells us that bashar means, or bashar means to bear news, to bear tidings, to publish, to preach, to show forth. Okay, it continues to say to gladden with good news, to bear news, to announce salvation as good news, to preach. Okay, and hithpale to receive good news. So there's peel and hithpale to receive good news. And this is an actual entry from, so it is not used, but so it also has from the Arabic. So there's actually an Arabic version of it, to be joyful, cheerful, especially in receiving glad tidings. So this word has an original Hebrew root, and then it has an Arab borrowing, to be joyful, cheerful, especially in receiving glad tidings, to gladden with good tidings, okay? And the primary sense appears to be that of beauty or fair within the Arabic, though. And remember, they want to apply this to Muhammad because this appears in various verses where Muhammad becomes Ezekiel's wife, okay, and Muhammad becomes a cross-dressing time traveler. Any comment before I go on, Thunderous?
No, I'm fine. Thank
you. Okay, so further on to the etymology. Then you have bashar, a primitive root, properly to be fresh, full, rosy, figuratively cheerful, to announce glad news. It also means messenger, to preach, to publish, to show forth, to bear, bring, carry, preach, or tell good things, to bring tidings. Right? It is used in the Quran. Let the people of the Bashar judge by what Allah has revealed in it. Should really be translated, let the people of the Evangelion. I made a typo there, so you need to fix that. Right? So the people of the good news. Let the people of the good news. So for some reason the Quran uses this, but not the people of the good news. So now, there is no way to the false Muslim claim that the original Gospels must be in Aramaic, because they claim that this has to be the case. In fact, I've had some now state that this has to be in Hebrew, right? And the assertion not to trust the Gospels, because you have various roots as well as you've got the Greek would make much more sense. I don't understand this argument as well as I should. This was taken from the original document I mentioned earlier. But any comments?
This is all just distraction argument that Muslims use to get away from the fact that the gospel account that we have today totally condemns the Quran and Islam. So they're, by hook or by crook, trying to cause deflection, smoke and mirrors. It's a shell game. This is not even a logical argument to make. It's just a dawagandist technique to try and obfuscate from what their situation is.
Actually, thank you for that. That's actually, I appreciate that. Yeah. So, yeah, someone else, doesn't the word Hajj have Hebrew roots? I actually discussed this word on Mal's channel when I discussed the origin of the Sharia, except there was a problem with these streaming software. and this didn't display, but it comes from the Hebrew hag. So yes, and they've just softened the two G's into the hajj. So yes, in fact, there's numerous Hebrew roots to the Arabic words, numerous of them. Okay, and Aquarian Riddle says there's a strong link between ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian languages. So looking at the etymology again, so it's also a verb to bear tidings, and also to rub smooth the face. Compared to the Arabic, remove the face of surface of a thing, right, and to be glad and joyful. So two very different meanings. In Arabic, he rejoiced him with the message of the birth of a son. Interesting. So the same word, the bashar, he rejoiced him. So this is an example. He rejoiced him with the message. That's the context of which you would have that. And in Ethiopic, bring a joyful message. So Assyrian, busuru. Now you have Assyrian, which is very similar to the bashar. And you have the Sabaean as well. It goes back to the Sabaeans who were mentioned in the Quran, right? And then also it is the proper name of a deity. Very interesting. These are just some of the etymological roots. Now, I don't understand all this as well as I should. That's why I'm talking about it, to see what it is that I know or don't know. Maybe I've missed something. So, guys, feel free to comment. Your thoughts before I move on?
No comment.
Thunderous?
Nothing.
Right, the Injil, again, gospel in the Quran. Okay, it's used to refer to the revelation transmitted by Jesus and was the scripture possessed and read by Christian contemporaries of Muhammad. Right. Now, let's have a look at the Encyclopedia of Islam, Volume 3. Injil, Arabic transcription of the word Euangelion. Oddly enough, they actually mention here the Greek Euangelion through the Ethiopian Wangel. So they actually subscribe to that concept as well, to that idea as well. And they mention various scholars here. This is very interesting, and I will come to this next year when I start doing the sources of Islam and the sources of the Quran. The variant Anjil may arise from a Mesopotamian Persian influence, because from what I'm seeing from the research work that I'm doing now, the original source of Islam derives from a Mesopotamian sect, oddly enough, from a Mesopotamian Persian group. Very interesting. So this variant, Anjil, so that would actually be very, very interesting, from the early 2nd century. Now of course you've got controversies. So the Muslim side, they accuse the Christians of having corrupted the original Gospels, right? Muslims love to do that, and for believing Muslims, this question presents no difficulties. It is the same God who reveals both books. So of course the Quran says certain things about that. Yes, he brought the books, and of course he then but Muslims go against what the Quran says. It is the same God who revealed both books. The Prophet Muhammad, having received revelation directly from God and had no need to consult directly or indirectly the scriptures in order to be able to reproduce some of the features which are found in them. Now, so they're saying that Muhammad got direct revelation, but then why does the Quran constantly say, consult the people of the book, talk to the people of the book, right? So, now, Allah, oddly enough, supposedly gave, and thank you, I got Peter Fall Muhammad, that's okay. Thank you very much. I much appreciate it. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the donation. Yeah. So, Allah gives Jesus. Now, as you know, it says in the 29th Gospel of Matthew, chapter 3, verse 1, part 5, that Jesus departs earth, the cloud comes down, he steps on the cloud, and as he rises up, he says, oh guys, I forgot. I completely forgot. I was given a book. Here's your copy. Here's your copy. Here's your copy. And he gives everyone a copy of the book that he was given, right? So because Allah is always right, as you know, so Allah gave Jesus the Injil. So the word Injil, oddly, is always singular, okay? The plural only developed much later in the Arabic language. And do we recall the verses where Jesus gives a copy of the book to the apostles? Thunderous?
Absolutely not. Jesus was the gospel, if you like.
So he didn't get given a book that he shared with the guys?
No.
Okay, so we have no evidence that he was given a book and that he gave a book to his followers.
This yet again raises so many problems. If Allah used Jesus as a prophet and Allah gave Jesus a book called the Injil, how incompetent does this show Allah to be, that Allah gave Jesus a book, and how long did it last? It was lost instantaneously. That just makes Allah look even more incompetent. The all-knowing, the all-wise, the creator of the universe, with the Quran in heaven before anything else, gives Jesus a book an Injil, and instantaneously it disappears as quick as he got it.
No, that's because the cloud passed over the Nile and Jesus accidentally dropped it in the Nile.
Was that with Uthman's burning the Quran as well?
Partly
Same
like
place.
that, and so in 1924, when they burned all the Qurans and dropped them in the Nile, they were just kind of following that proud tradition. So, according to the Quran, the Injil is a message that was sent down to Jesus. The question would be when, right?
Or I would even ask, first of all, what? What was the message?
What was the message exactly? Okay, so now supposedly, according to the Quranic text, of course, the same way that the Taurat or the Torah was sent to Moses.
Can I just ask something else?
Yeah.
If Allah gave Jesus a message that he was supposed to give Jesus' followers, okay, and it was lost, why did Allah not send another message? Why not keep repeating it until finally the message became the message rather than it got lost?
I have no good answers for you there. I don't know, but the Quran makes the claim that Jesus was given a book.
Yes, and
Right.
it was lost. So why not give Jesus another book?
Correct, and this book disappeared, but this book also existed at the time of Muhammad, because Muhammad saw the book. Muhammad had people read the book to him. Muhammad knew people who had the book, but the book is lost. The book, Muhammad never had a copy. Muhammad never kept a copy. Just so now, also they also claim that the Taurat was sent to Moses. We know that the Taurat was written by scribes, right? Was written by prophets. Was written by Moses and other people. So you've got, so this is completely ahistorical. It's completely a historic argument, but they claim that the Quran was also sent to Muhammad, and all of this happened without human involvement. That's the odd part. All of this was sent down without human involvement. And we know this, again, to be completely ahistorical, to be completely untrue. Query and Riddle says Muhammad also swore on the book, which is very interesting. So, yeah. And also, was there a complete book? Because clearly, we know historically there was no complete book at the time. There was nothing of the sort. There might have been fragments, but certainly nothing complete. Right. So the Quran states that Allah gave Jesus the gospel, like Atenahu. So the Quran states that Allah gave Jesus the gospel. So he gave him, here's your copy of the book. Right? Obviously to bring it into alignment with the idea that Muhammad was given a copy of the book. Now think about it. There's the mother of the book, right? Which has existed for all time in paradise, correct?
Yeah, this is, I think I know where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, well, the question is, so why didn't Allah give Jesus that book? If it's existed for all time, why did he give him a different book?
Okay, that wasn't the book I was going to that wasn't the direction I was going to go.
Where were you going to go?
See, that's a good point, though. That's a very good point you're raising there.
Right.
But my point would have been, or the one I was thinking of was, this for me kind of sets, I'm just thinking about it, this sets up Muhammad in the eyes of Muslims as more credible as a prophet, because all the other books, including the one sent to Jesus, was all lost, disappeared, bastardized and liquidated. Yet the book that Muslims have, the Quran, is divine and is being kept together and has been unchanged, not a dot or anything. So from the Muslim polemic side, it gives credibility to the Quran because this book has not been lost, whereas all the other books, including the one given to the Christians by Jesus, has been lost.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so Jesus, the son of Mary, not the son of God, right? And we gave him the Injil, which was guidance and light, confirming that which preceded it of the Torah as guidance. Excellent. Right? Now, Quran 57:27 says, we gave him the gospel. So there are numerous attestations in the Quran that Jesus was given a gospel. When? We don't know. Right? And of course, this original book. But then, of course, it says here that Allah taught Jesus the gospel. Right? So he was given it, but he was taught it. So that's fascinating. So yeah, but just keep that in mind. That's alam too. That's the different word there. And in Quran 5:110 it says, remember when I taught you writing and wisdom, the hikmah, and the Torah and the Injil, and when you designed from clay what was like the form of a bird with my permission, then you breathed into it and it became a bird. This, of course, is a Gnostic myth taken from the Syriac infancy gospel, also known as the Arabic infancy gospel. And it's a New Testament apocryphal writing concerning the infancy of Jesus. And it may have been compiled as early as the 6th century and was partly based on the infancy gospel of Thomas and the Protevangelium of James. We know for a fact this is a Gnostic story. It's got no relationship. So what I think we can begin to conclude, once I get into some other material later on, is that Muhammad, whoever he was referencing existing Gnostic and pseudo-Jewish Christian texts. Your thoughts?
No comments.
Okay, so these texts existed. Now, Arabia had become a little melting pot for all of these pagan groups, all of these Gnostic groups that had been kicked out of Rome, because remember, Rome became Christian. So all these other groups had to take a hike, and they all ended up in the one place where they could all, where there were no rules, Arabia. And all of these ideas blended and fused, and they started to copy each other. And these stories all went there, and Mo, being the ear, man who was all ears, listened to everything that he was told and wrote it down day and night. He simply just borrowed these ideas. So this Injil starts to me to look like this is simply Gnostic texts that he just copied stories from. Nathaniel says, if Allah taught the Injil, is there an eternal Injil on the golden tablets? Why not make 2 eternal books? That's a fairly good point. What do you think, Thunderous? If Allah taught the Injil, is there an eternal Injil on golden tablets? And why make 2 eternal books?
No, because we have to give Quran. Islam wants to give Islam and the Quran credibility. It can't, because if there was an eternal book in heaven that was the Injil, it makes Allah look incompetent that he handed down a book that couldn't be kept yet. It's eternal in heaven, but it can't be eternal on earth. They can't have that. You can only have one book eternal in heaven and one book eternal on earth to give Islam the credibility that it requires.
Okay, which is why they claim that the Quran abrogates the previous religions, yes. That the new message abrogates the Sharia of Muhammad abrogates the Sharia of Jesus, and each subsequent Sharia abrogates the one before it, or at least the majority of it. But it's very interesting that they also want to abrogate the Sharia of Jesus with the Sharia of Moses. Very weird. So hikmah, wisdom, science, and philosophy. Right, so just so you know, I just take this from the Encyclopedia of Islam. The Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, in the Quran is used in several Medinan passages for the revelation or part of it. So, yeah. So the Injil, was it given to Jesus during Ramadan? So it is commonly thought that the Injil was given to Jesus all at once. Remember, with no human intervention, just like the Torah was given to Moses. Right, and the Quran was given in stages, which is very odd. Why everyone else got their book all at once? The Quran was given over 20 years, 22 years.
Yeah, Allah was waiting for Khadija to die first.
That's a fair point. She wore the pants in the house. Mm-hmm. Right, this is a common view of the exegetes. The Quran was given in stages, and Jesus got it like all at once. Right, DHL delivered the book on the 13th day of Ramadan, just so you know, because Al-Suyuti in the Itqan mentions a tradition that the Injil was sent down on the 13th day of Ramadan.
So they don't know what the book is, but they know when it was sent.
To the day. They've even got the delivery certificate. It's kept inside the Kaaba. They won't show it to us, though. They've got the label right there. So, for Christians, at the time of the rise of Islam and today, this is not the meaning of the term gospel. It's not the book that God gave Jesus that we don't have anymore. Right? We have a completely different view. The gospel is a message about Jesus' life, his death, and resurrection proclaimed by Jesus or his followers.
Can I just add on to that? If you go to Matthew 24:14, it also says, this good news of the kingdom will be preached. So this gospel of good news is also about the incoming of God's kingdom. And we know that's true, because if you go to Matthew 6:33, it talks about seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. But if you move backwards a little bit in history to the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 44.
You're going too fast for me, man. Wow.
Sorry. Yeah. So if we want to understand what also is the gospel, we have to go to Matthew 24:14 first, because that gives a more accurate reflection as well. I'm not suggesting that what has been said about Jesus, the ransom, his life course, now I'm not denying any of that. That's all part of it, but there's something important as well that gets missed. So if we go to Matthew 24:14.
I'm on it here.
Okay, so and it reads there, And this gospel of the kingdom, notice that, this gospel of the kingdom, so it's this good news of God's kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. So when we're looking at Islam, Islam doesn't understand what the message is, but then that's exactly what Islam is going to do, because one has to look at something else in this, which hasn't been mentioned yet. Who is really behind Islam? And one has to conclude, if Satan's running the planet, then you can bet your bottom dollar Satan and the demons are behind Islam. They
Right.
are not in any way going to draw attention to anything that exposes them. They're going to draw and bastardize and liquidate what the gospel is, try and confuse people with words and meanings of words and genealogies to detract as argument away from what the good message is, and that is the kingdom of God. So if you go to Matthew 6:33 next.
Matthew 6.
Matthew
Great.
6:33.
Here we go. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you.
Exactly that. So notice that there. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. That would mean living a life where you're putting God's kingdom first, God's godly principles, and living your life as though you're expecting the kingdom to take place tomorrow, and God's righteous lifestyle. So the kingdom, the whole point of me bringing this up is that the kingdom is a very real government. It's not some condition of the heart. And how do we know that? For the last scripture, if you don't mind, can we go to Daniel 2:44? And this really solidifies what the gospel message is. Daniel 2:44.
In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever.
Right. Yeah. Can I just break that down just a little bit, if I may?
Yeah. Sure.
Right. So it says in there, in the days of those kings. So if it was sort of like talking about the past, it would be Daniel would have said in the days of them kings. If he was talking about contemporary times, he would have said in the days of these kings.
Mm-hmm.
But he's talking about a time in the future, in the days of those kings,
Yeah.
the God of heaven will set up a kingdom. Okay, notice what it goes on to say, that will never be destroyed. So God's going to set up a government that will never be destroyed. Okay, then he goes on to say, it will be left to another people. So it's not going to be voted in, voted out. There's not going to be any military coup. There's not going to be like a sniper with one bullet causing 7 wounds between Jesus and maybe the Apostle Paul, and found on a gurney somewhere with no blood on it or anything. It's not going to be, they're not going to get. This is a permanent government. Notice what it happens next. It will crush and put all those kingdoms. Crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever. That is the message. So it's not going to be like Monty Python, where some foot comes out of the sky and one foot lands on the Houses of Parliament and one lands on the White House. It's talking about a total annihilation of man-made governments and the man-made structure of the system of things that we're living at the moment. That is what the kingdom message is. So when Jesus says this good news of the kingdom, we're getting it there. And that's the one thing that Satan and the demons do not want you to know, because that's the one thing we should all be putting first in our lives.
Right. Good point. Yeah, so it's not entirely benign. It does talk about crushing the competition.
Absolutely.
And so guys, you have hopefully some motivation on Monday. Get out there and crush the competition. And for additional motivation, I'd like to tell you that I think you should give 100% every week. Okay? And I hope you are giving 100% every week. My plan for doing so is that on Monday, I give 5%, sometimes 10%. Tuesday, assuming I've got some energy, I'll give like 15%. And then you kind of go for like a big push on Wednesday, give like 40%. And then you wind down, you get like 20% on Thursday, and you just save that last 10% for Friday, and you just stumble home. Okay? That's how I give 100% every week. But 5% on Monday, guys. Get in that 5%, the week's good. Right, moving on. So this is the Islamic History and Comedy Hour. So I got a comment up here that states that there were also other agents of revelation for the Quran, like Umar, who had influenced some surahs to be revealed. Yet that is true. That's a very good point, Omid. And then, of course, you had Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith, of course, also had golden tablets on which there were little secrets revealed. That was a little higher. Oh, there we go. Golden tablets with sacred writings too. So yes, anyone can play that game. All right. Now, moving on. So let me just check how many slides I still have left.
He also
Yeah?
didn't he also have convenient scriptures that were only sort of like only he could understand, and he got the benefit from as well. Isn't there similarities in that line?
Say that again. Oh, that only he could see or something. Tell me again.
That only he could read. That only he could sort of like explain or understand or discern
Correct.
and transmute. And he also had sort of like convenient scriptures that sort of like benefited him in his lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Now, there are a couple of Islamic scholars. There's certain conflicting views. So we'll call it to an end shortly because we're roughly halfway through this. But this is introducing the subject. So there's Badawi or Badawi, as I was told. I met a fantastic Jordanian guy when I was working out the Middle East. His name was Badawi, and Abd al-Halim, writing in the Brill Arabic English Dictionary of the Quranic Usage, the Christian tradition is synonymous with the good news taught about Jesus, while the Islamic concept emphasizes a divinely revealed text. These are two vastly different views, and I think there's no way to reconcile these views. The one says Jesus brought a message of good news, right? The kingdom, the divine kingdom, whereas Islam says Jesus had a book. He took out from the divine library and then he lost it, and he probably had to go up to heaven to go and pay library fines. So those are two completely different concepts of what this is, and Islam insists that its view is the right view, and it refuses to listen to Christianity in context. It dismisses it completely out of hand. So the term gospel can denote one of 4 books that Christians regard as divinely inspired and authoritative. Right? These are known as gospels in the New Testament. This understanding of the gospel as a book is closely related to the first meaning of the gospel as message about Jesus. So the New Testament gospels are regarded by Christians as an account of the good news about Jesus. The Gospel of John is the good news according to John, an account of the message. So that's our understanding. Right? Now, what are the implications of there being 2 different concepts of gospel between Muslims and Christians? So here's the divide. The divide is they've got a separate view of what is the gospel versus ours. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Oh, I was just thinking straight away with Islam, if they're going to suggest that the gospel of the Injil is something that Jesus received directly from Allah but then was lost, I hope they stop quoting John 14:16.
Maybe they have. So let me see whether there's any comments. Oh, so they've been ingrained. So Veronica says correctly, they have been ingrained that there must be a book. They don't understand we believe in a message and a person, and that there's letter by letter worldview interests no one outside of Islam. Correct. That is very, very true. Now in Islam, the Quran is the supreme mutawatir. Okay, it's the supreme mutawatir text, which is recurrently transmitted and thus authoritative. In theory, though, not in practice, a text perceived to be in conflict cannot be regarded as correct. Right, that's the theory. Now there's a term bayina in Islam, the bayinat, clear, evident. In the Quran, this appears as meaning manifest proof. In law, bayina means the proof per excellence, the proof par excellence, right? That established by oral testimony. Islam does not respect written transmission. It does not respect recurrently transmitted written texts. This waffle of the mouth, Chinese whispers, broken telephone, this is what it deems as manifest proof, as the proof par excellence, right? And applied not only to the fact of giving testimony at law, but also to the witnesses themselves. So they claim that the witnesses are so excellent, but their witness is also incredibly excellent, and the message is unbroken, and that the transmission is perfect. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
I'm just thinking there, they're going to have to say that, aren't they? They've got no choice because they've got no written text to confirm, so they have to go by oral tradition.
Correct.
They have no choice but to say that.
Yeah, which is very convenient. It's like my dog ate the evidence. But I did see him steal the money. It wasn't me. I did see him steal. My dog ate the evidence. I promise you, my dog ate my phone. My dog ate it. but I don't have it. But I can assure you it was true, right?
And then some Muslims are trying to say you've got one transmitter, one chain of narrators, one chain of evidence direct from the source. We've got 14, we've got 15, so ours is better because we've got 15 behind us. You've only got one.
Yeah, it's the sheep ate my Quran excuse. Exactly. The sheep should have eaten the whole freaking Quran, not just the, did that sheep die in agony a few moments later? We have to wonder.
It died feeling that its jugular had been cut.
You're right. And guys, just on that point, since we are talking about jugglers, there is only one way to kill a circus, and Islam, believe me, is a circus. The only way to kill a circus is to go for the juggler. Okay?
Did you just think that up? Did you just make that up?
Not quite. I've been wanting to use that whole week.
And I gave you the. You
gave me the opportunity. Thank you very much. So guys, I hope you've not only found excellent dietary advice here, but also you found some reason to laugh and learn about Islamic stuff.
Who thought Islam could be so much fun?
You have to laugh at it, man. That's the only thing. It's laugh or cry, right? Pick one. I'd rather just laugh at it.
Satan's certainly laughing at it. Look how many people he's got fooled by it.
Yeah, that he did. That's incredible. Right, yeah. So pineapples, jugglers. Yeah, today I'll be a whole week, guys. I will be here all week. So mutawatir means uninterrupted. So let me just move my camera down again. So mutawatir means uninterrupted. Okay? In the science of tradition, now understand Islamic sciences, first and foremost, their priority is religious sciences, religious knowledge, most of which is denied to the lower level Muslims. Understand, to lay Muslims, it's purely the domain of the scholars. They have the, I can't remember the name right now, the ilm the practical sciences. Okay, those are a secondary level of science. The main science is what Muhammad brought, and we know Muhammad was a clown. Right, so we know that Muhammad wasn't the smartest man to ever live, but of course Islam does claim he was the smartest man to ever live. Right, so anyway, uninterrupted. A report with so many transmitters that there could be no collusion, all being known to be reliable and not being under any compulsion to lie. Right, how they can confirm this from a 7th century Bedouin tribe that lived in the desert that had no written records is beyond me, but okay, fine. Now you've got different kinds of mutawatir. You've got mutawatir bil-lafz, a tradition in which the texts appended to the various chains are identical in wording. Okay, so you've got the text, the matan, okay, M-A-T-N, the matan, and you've got the isnad, the chain of transmission, and the matan, the content, right? So a tradition in which the texts are identical. Then you've got mutawatir bil-mana, a tradition in which the texts are identical in meaning. Okay, so the gist, the context, the derived meaning is the same, but not the actual wording. Right? So just wanted to bring that up. And then you've got tawatur. Okay, if we go look at tawatur, and we just move us back up here. Tawatur, lafzi, the verbatim mutawatir transmission of a text, distinguished from tawatur man'awi, transmission according to the gist or one salient feature of a given text. So tawatur lafzi is the verbatim mutawatir transmission. So tawatur lafzi means that the text, the content is identical, and the mutawatir is the transmission is reliable, right? Which is distinguished from tawatur man'awi, transmission according to the gist or one salient feature of a text. So they say, well, he's got that one feature, therefore we can say that generally it is the same text, the meaning is the same. Now, within the Sharia, we learn, I'm going to move the camera again, we've arrived at all the rulings of the sacred law through evidence that is either unquestionably established, transmission. Understand? So according to Islam, oral transmission is unquestionable, right? And then of course they have probabilistically established transmission. They work the percentages. In other words, they make it all up. Then you have the surahs of the Quran, all of its verses, those hadiths which have reached us by so many channels of transmission that belief in them is obligatory, mutawatir. So what is mutawatir is obligatory. Now, of course, if you ask the scholars, how many of these hadiths are mutawatir? Can you confirm? The debate ranges between there are 9 hadith of the millions of hadith that exist, right? Of the absolute hundreds of thousands, if not millions that exist, right? 9 are mutawatir, some say 5, and in fact, the scholars can only agree on quite literally just one hadith. So I don't know what the value of mutawatir is. If quite possibly only one hadith is mutawatir and the rest are all questionable. But anyway, you've got unquestionably established transmission, right? And then it says it is impossible that the various channels could have conspired to fabricate them. This is the Islamic law.
But they will quite easily believe the Jews and the Christians conspired, went out to the whole known world, gathered every copy of or parchment or scroll, brought it back to a location, rewrote Genesis to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or wherever, and redistributed the whole human family with a new, revised, corrupted version of the Bible. Right, and this in itself is kind of like problematic.
You forget. At the time, Christians had technology that they could utilize, because don't forget they had an entire DHL fleet of airplanes, because don't forget we know that they had a hidden airport and they had the ability to fly these books around, because there was a guy called Pontius the Pilate, for instance. We know
oh man, it's getting worse.
No, he was responsible for the flight out of Egypt. That's how the Jews got out of Egypt. Pontius the Pilate.
So in effect, there was some kind of like Men in Black things going on, where if you look at the light and they press the button, you forget the previous 10 years of your life. So they'll figure that in this instance, they just forgot the scrolls and the parchments and the message that was contained therein.
I am going to start.
What amazes me with Islam, though, is when it makes the claim is how did the Jews and the Christians know what to corrupt? You see, to know what to corrupt, they must have understood what was in the Quran or something about Muhammad in order to corrupt Genesis to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and corrupt the parts that they knew were going to conflict with Islam. Do you understand what I'm saying? I must.
Yeah, sorry, I was laughing at some of the comments in the chat. My apologies. If you could just please say, just repeat that. But so, how did they know which ones to corrupt? Because
what I'm saying is, how did they know what parts of the Bible to corrupt and with what message? Because you will have had to have understood what Islam is and who Muhammad was in order to corrupt it in opposite direction.
But isn't it convenient that the Christians didn't, and the Jews, working together, didn't corrupt the verses that the Muslims need to prove that Muhammad is a prophet?
Well, this goes back to another point that, is why is it then that we find with the things that Islam kind of like argues with, why do we not find those things in the Bible, the red herring arguments?
Right. No, agreed.
But we don't find those in there. But the arguments that they raise about the corruption of the Bible, for instance, are the very things that you would have to ask questions. Well, how would they know what to corrupt if they knew anything about the Quran? Because at this moment in time, the Quran is in heaven and hasn't been revealed to anybody. If that's the case, then how did they know what to corrupt in the Quran, in the Bible?
Don't forget, the scholars do state that the Quran was corrupted after the time of Muhammad. After, which means that there was a full Quran now. So that the Bible was corrupted after Muhammad. This is the statement of the scholars, right? Was corrupted after. Now, if this is after, we can prove texts found today, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we compare that with pre-Muhammadan scrolls, and then of course we find that they're identical, right? So yeah, that's a problem. And then someone says, "I just told my worst joke yet." It's given old joke a home week, okay? Don't blame me. I'm just trying to find a home for old jokes. I thought I'd share them with you guys, and maybe you can find a place to let them die in peace. Retire and just fade away. That was another joke, but again, okay. So yeah, what else do we have? So guys, next year when you heard it here first, okay? I'm gonna prove how Pontius the Pilate arranged the flight out of Egypt, and I'm gonna show this from. No, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so yeah, they can't get their story straight on any of this. But yeah, so there's issues here. But I wanted to highlight this. So, and then it also states here, okay, the Muslims talk about these, as for the evidentiary character of these texts, regardless of whether they are unquestionably or probabilistically established, there are of two types, right? Unquestionable, as in like, don't ask any questions. Right? It doesn't mean established evidence. It means don't ask questions. Don't think about it. So understand, unquestionable, how do they mean this? Right? And then two, in none of which is there any room for disagreement, or we will kill you. Nor have any differences concerning them been heard of or reported from the imams of sacred law. So everything in this category is termed unquestionable as evidence. Very, very interesting. So this is how they get away with it. Okay? So Yeah. Sleepyhead Luke says after Muhammad. So basically that's a claim made by Ibn Hazm, for instance. Okay, Ibn Hazm states that the Bible was corrupted after, because he says, look, and I'm going to get into this. This is part of what's coming in this examination that we're doing. I said, this is my first run through. I'm a little, it's new material, so I need to run through it. Ibn Hazm, major polemics. He's like the source, he's not the original source, but he's the guy that compiled the anti-Christian, anti-biblical polemic, anti-Jesus polemic, anti-Paul polemic, and then he spawned like 3 guys, around that period. Anyway, so he claims the Bible is corrupted after the time of Muhammad. The problem being that, of course, we can now prove that this is not the case, right? So then different scholars come up and say that it was corrupted before, but then understand now there's this conflict between them, and this leaves them into some serious issues. Check that out in my polemics videos, Islam versus St. Paul. So now moving on from this is from the Sharia, okay? And they say here, it can be interpreted in other than its apparent sense. So now they say that texts can be made by way of figure of speech or metaphor. So in other words, things can be reinterpreted. So notice, it depends on how it's interpreted, right? In other than its apparent sense, in the context, without this contradicting by what was intended. So fine. So in other words, we can make it up and say we can make it say what we want it to say when we need it to. And we find scope for scholarly difference of opinion and the number of meanings that a text can imply, how much interpretation it will bear. So in other words, they are happy to reinterpret anything at any time. The lawgiver, in this case, is Allah. However, according to the Sharia, the lawgiver, Allah, is synonymous with Muhammad in terms of his authority. So they are the same. They're the same person as far as the Sharia is concerned. Muhammad is Allah and Allah is Muhammad. Your thoughts?
I just find this perverse and sickening, to be honest with you, that this could take place within the faith system, where you can have a word that can have any number of meanings depending on the circumstance that you find yourself, or it's not you yourself, but Islam finds itself at any one given time, that you can retrospectively apply whatever meanings that you want. I think it's called rhetorical devices now, where your circumstance can determine what the text meant, which means then what does the Quran mean then? If it's not, how many times does Allah say in the Quran, this is a simple book, a book made clear, a book easy to understand? This just clearly proves that if your own scholars are contradicting one another, how can it be clear then?
Correct. It just shows they've got there's no boundaries here. These guys can just make it up as they go along. There's something wrong with that. And guys, I'd like to wind down. We're about roughly halfway through this. So let me just take this away. Were you okay to? Should we wind it down here? Thunderous, maybe pick this up next week. So let me finish these 1 or 2 pages on the Sharia, okay, which is the final interpretation of the meaning of the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah and all that. So the types of Sunnah, okay, Hadith, include Hadiths that are mutawatir. As I said, scholars debate. There's 9, there's 5, there's 1. Well, okay. And then, of course, they also say which is obligatory to believe in, denial of which is unbelief. Fascinating. So it is kufr to disbelieve in certain qualities of hadiths. Okay, it's unbelief, right? Which puts these, in some cases, above the Quran, because the Quran's been abrogated as well, right? A couple of comments. Le Peño says, read Andrea Weissman, who is Edom, and Yair Davidi, Edom and Germany. I'll have a look into that if I recall. Just drop it in the chat later, so I don't have to search through this for it. In the Injil, Isa throws the first stone at the woman accused of adultery. Then the naughty Christians come along, change the name to Jesus, and have him save the woman. So yeah, that's very, very weird. Guys, on that point, then of course Martin Luther comes along and says that Jesus slept with that woman. But that's a story for another day, because man, when I dig into Martin Luther, oh my. But that's a story for another day. Right. And let's see. So let's finish this. So these designations do not directly influence the authenticity rating of the hadith. So a rating of a hadith at a lesser level doesn't change its authenticity. Because a singular hadith might be rigorously authenticated, and a well-authenticated hadith, right? Hadiths of both type being obligatory for Muslims to believe in. So a hadith doesn't have to be mutawatir. A hadith doesn't have to be sahih for it to be obligatory for a Muslim to believe in it, because that hadith is considered rock solid, totally authentic, even though it's not totally authentic. Interesting. And someone who denies them but these hadith though, someone who denies them is considered corrupt and not an unbeliever. Now that's fascinating stuff. So yeah, this sounds like a lot of word games and a lot of just semantics.
Exactly that.
Right, so final slide, guys. I'll stop here. In the Quran, Jesus' apostles are the Hawariyun, the apostles. The Quran does not comment on whether or not they should be understood as being involved in transmitting the Injil. It says nothing about that, right? Muslims developed a different concept of the gospel because they claim a message was sent out to Jesus all at once. The other is a message about Jesus, which Christians view as divinely inspired but humanly authored. So we know that there was no random message sent to Jesus, because where is it? And the Muslims did not preserve it. So I will pause there. I'll stop here. I think that's enough for today. Okay, I'll do one more slide. So Hawari, apostle. Okay, Hawariyun, 12 persons who at the time of the second Aqaba. Notice though, Jesus had 12 apostles. Guess who else had 12 apostles? I wonder. A guy by the name of Mo might have had 12 apostles. Wonder where he got that idea. And then the final slide. Any comments on that?
No comment. It speaks for itself, doesn't it?
And now, so I'll pause. This is the last slide I'll do. The canonical New Testament Gospels do not fit the Islamic expectation of what the Injil should be. Clearly, there's massive conflict. So Muslim scholars and apologists have proposed the existence of a pure original Injil, which is partly or sometimes barely preserved in the New Testament Gospels. Right? So for instance, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Kathir, they do claim that portions have been preserved. Right? I'll get into that later when I get into part 2. It goes into much more detail. But the Quran fails to provide much detail on the supposed content of the Injil. But another major thread, it insists on scriptural continuity. Quran 9:111, as I mentioned, that the New Testament Gospel speaks of jihad. Christians are meant to do jihad. So it doesn't show anything that is actually found within the Gospels. Right? It's all Gnostic text. It's all pseudo-Jewish Christian texts, and pagan ideas, right? But it does insist on scriptural continuity. So the Quran makes this insistence and cannot prove this. I'll pause here. So guys, thank you very much, Erkan. Every time you heard Quran is perfectly preserved, feel free to use the yeah, that's not true. Yeah, exactly. So guys, I'll pause here. Hopefully this was interesting. It's my first run through of this material. Any comments, thoughts in the chat below, please. And I may delete this, because I need to come back to this another time. But yeah, your thoughts, Thunderous, I'll give you the last word.
No, I thought it was an excellent discussion this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed being part of it, and what I thought was particularly encouraging, not just the material, but the listening audience as well in their participation. I just wanted to give a big thank you and a big shout to everybody that has something and amusing as well, kind, encouraging and amusing. I thank the audience as well.
Well, thank you guys. I do appreciate it. Yes, so this will tie into some work that I'm doing, and I'll be doing a show with Ask Truth Apologetics. I'll be revealing some new material next week. Again, it's a first run through as well. I'm busy cleaning that up, and do look for me. I might be on another channel, like I mentioned. The man whose first name is Doctor and his surname is not Nike. Hopefully soon. I'm waiting to hear back. We shall see.
I wish it was Nike. I really wish it was Nike.
He's not going to talk to me now, is he? You know? I'm a medical doctor. Okay, guys, so thank you all very much. And yeah, I shall see you guys soon. On Sunday, I will be on Chris Claus's channel. I'll be doing a show there. So wait for the announcement on the channel of Chris Claus. And thank you, Thunderous, for your input. Thanks for your thoughts and your assistance and your feedback. Le Peño, I got it the first 5 times you sent that message. Thank you very much. Right, and thanks, guys. So till Sunday, I'll see you again, and I will do this. I'll pick this up next Friday with you. Thanks, guys, and stay away from cauliflower. And remember, seriously, try and eat a pineapple without a knife. It's not going to go down well. Pineapple is an enemy fruit. Okay. Good night, guys. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.